I got to a certain point in my life where I had to stop blaming. I had to stop blaming other people for my issues. Because that's the easy thing to do. That's the easy default, right? Or the response is to say, okay, my life is jacked up. That's your fault. Or that's my mom's fault. Or that's my dad's. You mentioned parenting and dysfunctional families. I believe everyone comes from a dysfunctional family. Like, I don't care who you are. You could come from like a really classy family, but there's always going to be some level of dysfunction.
Beliefs are the hidden scripts that run our lives. Beliefs lead to thoughts, thoughts lead to actions, action leads to habits, and those habits lead to outcomes. So if we can master our beliefs, we can control our outcome.
Welcome back to Food for Thought. My name is Santiago Castro, your host, and on today's episode, we will be interviewing one of my great friends and clients, Jake Ransom. Jake is not only one of my great friends, but he's also a husband, a father, and he runs a massive sales team here in San Diego within the solar industry. But before all that, Jake actually dives into how he grew up in a regular home and started to slowly get into doing drugs, which then led to a heavy addiction that almost cost him his life. And then that even led to being homeless and having to discover himself, and then getting into entrepreneurship and the journey in that, and how he got to a point where now he has a flourishing business, a beautiful family, and not only that, a perspective that cannot be shaken. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because it really does help, and enjoy this episode. I really appreciate you coming on the show, man.
100%.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
No, dude, thank you. I know you're super busy.
Yeah.
The whole team you're running and stuff, so I really appreciate your time for sure.
Bro, I want to honor you, man. We've been friends now for what? How long? Like,
Dude,
6-7 years?
yeah.
Met at church.
Yeah.
And bro, you've just been nothing but a blessing in my life. And love you and Dee Dee and just your family, what you're creating and what you're building. And
Thanks, man.
I remember I kept seeing you around, like not only at church, but other places. Do you remember that? I would see you out in public, like here and there. That was like probably within the first like year or two of meeting you.
Yeah.
So I feel like there was some weird like thing, like God was trying to tell us that like we were supposed to be friends or just have some type of connection. So yeah, man, like I said, like I honor you because you've been nothing but just so kind to me. And I love your character, and your spirit is just so warm, and it's a blessing to be able to partner with Optic Element and kind of take my voice and my brand like to the next level.
Yeah, thanks.
And I couldn't think of any better group to partner with than Optic Element, dude. So like I just feel super thankful for you and the team. Shout out to Caesar and shout out to my success manager, Destiny. Yeah. And the whole squad, dude. Yeah. Shout out OE.
Thanks, dude. No, I mean, I appreciate it, man. I mean, you're one of the very few people that you're like really easy to be friends with. You know what I mean? It's just like, I forgot who said it, but I think somebody said it. I think I was at your wedding where they said that, that you've never met a stranger before, which is like such a way to put, how like charismatic and very like natural you are with people. So
yeah, thank you.
You make it easy, man. So there's no real effort on my part. You're just like such an awesome person. So
yeah, no, dude, thank you for saying that, man. That's really cool. And yeah, man, I it's funny because like just maybe 10 minutes ago we were just talking like what should we speak about, like what's gonna be the format for the podcast.
Yeah.
I guess that last idea translates to this, and like it just being like kind of an easy free flowing thing. I don't know what we're gonna get into. I don't know exactly what we're gonna talk about, but I'm super open minded, and regardless, I think whatever we do talk about in our conversation is going to be good, and it's going to be of high value and just overall educational, informative, and just like overall encouraging. I don't want to make this about. I mean, I'm down to share some stuff about me, but whenever I have the chance to speak, whether it's like in a setting like this or like in a group setting or like whatever it may be, I try to make it a point to communicate that it's not, I don't want it to make it about me necessarily. Like I'll share some stuff about my history, my story, kind of what's going on in my world, but I like to make it more about others, like make it more about the listeners and the audience.
100%. Yeah.
So that's kind of my intention,
Yeah, no, I love that, man. I don't know if I've ever told you, but the mission, at least my purpose and my life purpose in this podcast is really just like it's more of an expression of that purpose, and is to really bring freedom out of overcoming the human default. That's like my purpose statement, my life statement, what I feel like I was created to do. And just, what I like to do with that is bring people on like you who have certain stories that a lot of our viewers can relate to. So I know you're going to bring a lot of value. You have a crazy story, plus you're doing really well in business, and you have your family and all these things that I really want you to share. Because there's a lot of things that I can't connect with people on, but I bring people on that can. Because at least like to give you a background behind that purpose statement is that, a lot of us are born mainly at a default. You know what I mean? Like we're born into this world, and our parents, have all these issues that they've never more than likely dealt with. And then we automatically, take that on, and then we're not even starting at square one, we're starting at like -10. And then so we spend most of our childhood, trying to either work our way up to square one, and then maybe like have a decent life. For some people never really make their way up to square one. But our human default as just humans, where we have, we've have a tendency to fail in aspects of like, we don't always do the right thing, but then plus, of the baggage that we take on from our family, it tends to really put us in a position where our life is never as great as it could be. So really what it is how to overcome, the human default, and then how that brings freedom into actually living the life that, you're designed to live, and all these things. And so especially with your story, which I really kind of want to get into, is you had a crazy, experience with drugs, and you kind of really like came out of that. And a lot of people don't, you know what I mean? I know a lot of my friends who still have issues with drugs. And I really want to get into that because that's something I feel like a lot of people in today's world really kind of like, tend to really dive into. And I understand, because there's a lot of things happening in this world, and I feel like the accessibility is just crazy. Plus, like, you can like make, any type of drug out of chemicals underneath your sink, you know what I mean? So it makes it a lot easier to do it. Plus, like, it's an escape and all these things. So I want to dive into that, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about kind of your story, how you got into it, and then how you got out of it.
Totally. Yeah. So I want to first acknowledge the first point that you made. I love that mission and that vision that you have of, you said, overcoming the human default.
Yeah.
I think that's deep. And I think naturally our initial response to the world, let's just say when we wake up in the morning, I don't know about you, but like my initial response, I think this is just part of human nature, is we focus on the bad. Like we focus on like a problem, or like something negative, or something that we have to fix, or something that's like stressing us out. So it's important that we take control over this. And I'll tie that into my recovery here in a sec. So I'll get to that, but that's really deep. And I love to hear you share that, overcoming the human default. And I truly feel like it's our default to, we gravitate towards problems, or we gravitate towards stuff that like tends to drain our energy. And something that I've gotten a little bit okay at, I'm still getting better at it, is taking control over this, because the problem really centers in our mind. It all starts up here. So I think getting mental strength, getting mental clarity is what I've tried to focus on. That's something that's been a game changer for me, because until I can have control over where my thoughts are going, like, it's only me that's going to dictate where my life's going, right? I know you're big on ownership, right? Extreme ownership. Like I got to a certain point in my life where I had to stop blaming. I had to stop blaming other people for my issues, because that's the easy thing to do. That's the easy default, right? Or the response is to say, okay, my life is jacked up. That's your fault, or that's my mom's fault, or that's my dad's. So you mentioned parenting and dysfunctional families. I believe everyone comes from a dysfunctional family. Like, I don't care who you are. You could come from like a really classy family, but there's always going to be some level of dysfunction in every family. So rather than my whole thoughts on that is, rather than having a victim mentality, and because I think for the most part, like my upbringing was actually pretty great. Like, had two loving parents, and had a really, there was love in the house. My dad was, a hard worker. My mom was kind of the stay-at-home mom, which was a blessing. My dad was he worked in law enforcement. He worked in the border patrol for like almost 30 years. So he had a background in the military as well, and so does his dad. So that sense of discipline and routine and being a diligent worker. I think a lot of that was instilled in me through my dad, as well as the like sense of adventure spirit I have. I think I picked up that from my dad, because my dad is all like, he's super into like he's into surfing and like going super fast on his motorcycle and like and skiing, and so he's really like, he loves the outdoors and camping and going on like adventures like that. So a lot of that has been instilled in me through my dad. So I think a big part of my family lineage, I have this like go type of mode, something that I'm thankful that I got from my mom. My mom is more the chill type of person, like, okay, don't go like too fast or don't go too hard. So I've kind of had that balance from like my dad and then my mom. But anyway, so I'll kind of just share, I'll kind of go backwards a little bit. So rewind a little bit. So the first 5 years of my life, I lived in Yuma, Arizona. You know where that's at? There's a military base there, right? Yeah. It's a Marine base. Yeah. So no, Yuma sucks. There's nothing cool about Yuma. But my dad was, like I say, my dad was in the border patrol, right? So Yuma's obviously right there, border town. So he was stationed there. And like at the time that like there was legitimately like no like great hospitals there. So when I was born, my family was living in Yuma, but they both my parents grew up in Long Beach, right here, Long Beach, California. It's like an hour and a half north from here. And so when my mom was about to go into labor with me, like 2 weeks before that, she went up to my grandma's house, her mom, to kind of stay there so I could be born at the Long Beach hospital, which is like a way more like legit hospital, because Yuma didn't have like it was sketchy, you know? So I was born in Long Beach hospital. But then like I said, the first 5 years of my life lived in Yuma, Arizona, had definitely memories there, various memories in that place. But then my family, when I was 5, my family moved to San Diego, which God bless them for making that decision. Cause like, yes, there's, like I said, nothing going on in Yuma. And San Diego's awesome. So ever since I've been 5, I've lived here in San Diego. And another kind of connection, my dad, being in the border patrol, San Diego, obviously another border town. So he just got stationed here. My mom, like I said, she worked, a few different jobs, but like the big majority of my upbringing, she was kind of the stay-at-home mom. I have a younger brother and an older sister. So I always say this, I'm like, and this is common with, it goes back to the dysfunctional family thing and just analyzing people's roles. Like everyone has a role, right? Like in a family, it's super interesting. I don't know if you've like studied this at all, but there's a whole family dynamic, and because you're an only child, right?
By blood, yeah, but
yeah.
I have step siblings.
That's right. Right. And so even that, there's a whole like picture that can be painted with that and your role in your family, and everyone has a unique role. So in my experience, just from my knowledge, like typically the middle child is like a troublemaker. It's like a very common thing. It's a common trend. So I like my older sister, she is kind of the all-star, like straight A student, like literally legit. She was like the valedictorian of her class, like head of the cheerleading squad, like super smart, like really intelligent, and like kind of on the straight and narrow. So she's kind of like the star child, Me and my sister are super close, by the way. I love my sister. She lives up in and her family is up in Santa Barbara. So they're up there. And then my younger brother, he's like super mellow. He's just like very chill, like cool, calm, collected. He's just, he's into surfing. Him and myself were, him being my brother, we were super close. I was, typically, I was into all this, Southern California stuff growing up as a kid, right? Like riding bikes, skateboarding in the neighborhood, like just doing like, what kids do in the neighborhood, having fun, goofing off and stuff. Again, super good childhood. Fast forward to when I was about 17 in high school, about 16, 17. That's when I started to kind of dabble in like the party scene. And I always gravitated to, and I still feel like this. I tend to gravitate towards people like my friend group. I like people that are a little quirky or like off the wall or like into some type of like they're into like the counterculture a little bit, because I have that like I have just like a rebellious spirit in me, and I think that's good. I don't want to totally, like, as I'm maturing in my life and as I'm developing, I want to keep that. I want to keep that sense of rebelliousness, but like to a certain point, I'm not trying to like, push it to the boundaries and then like end up in prison for the rest of my life. So I'm like, no, I don't want to push it too much, but I feel like God, like he put that in me. And I feel like he's put that in a lot of people, and it's to be nurtured for good, right? And to rebel. I mean, shoot, like we can rebel against evil. We can rebel. We can push back towards darkness and so forth. But anyway, I've always gravitated to like people that are like unique and just kind of like weirdos and artists and people that are kind of have that rebellious thing kind of going on. So in high school, that was like the friend group that I gravitated to, and that's always that's also typically like the party crowd, So it's a group that was like, having the parties on the weekends, drinking and stuff. So that was kind of you asked about my experience with being in recovery and stuff. And so yeah, in high school, I was started drinking. That's kind of where it started. And then I started smoking weed. Again, this was like when I was like 16, 17. And dude, I just was super into it. It became a very at first it was a kind of a gradual progression. Like it's just a little bit of weed, a little bit of drinking. I wasn't like full blown like addict, alcoholic from the get go. But there was like thinking back on it, there was a gradual sense of progression. That progression got sped up closer like a few years later. But yeah, and then when I was about 18, 19, that's kind of when I started to get into, that's when I discovered pain pills. So like opiates. Yeah, that was something that when I tried for the first time, I remember my parents had like a medicine cabinet, and I like snuck in there. And this is when I was just kind of in this phase where I was like experimenting with like all different types of drugs,
Yeah.
And they had these, my parents in their medicine cabinet had this like a medicine bottle that was like it was like half full of like Vicodin. And I got in there and I was like, I had to kind of like sneak it because I didn't want them to know that I was like going into their medicine cabinet and like taking it, So I took like one, and then like I went back like the next day and took like two, and then like the next day, and then like by the end of like that next week or two, it was like empty. So I'm like, I'm like, man, they probably found out eventually, but I once I discovered opiates, bro, I was like obsessed. I was like, my mind was like, I want to do this as often as I possibly can.
What do you think was that for you that made it that like were, for example, like out of like doing drinking and smoking weed, what was it like opiates specifically that?
Yeah, I mean, they're literally, good question. They're literally designed, like they're called painkillers, So they're literally designed to have you feel this like euphoria, kind of warm and fuzzy type of feeling that's like you just feel like you're on top of the world. So when I was getting involved in that, when I was like trying that stuff out, my introductory to opiates, even drinking and stuff like that, like I had no idea where my life would go because of that, because I would, like I said, started doing pain pills, and then a couple years later, I tried heroin for the first time.
Oh, dang.
And that's the thing that like really just took me down a path of like crazy, crazy darkness. So even the first time I did dope, the first time I tried heroin, I knew what I was doing was sketchy. Like, it's like pretty significant. Like it's just known that that's a like legit, like it's like crack or meth and heroin. It's like one of the like the big like sketchy ones,
For sure.
I knew it was bad what I was getting into, but not to the extent I didn't know like what my life would look like just a couple years down the line because of me trying it for the first time, you know? And sure enough, like when I started using dope, it went from like use to abuse to like full on addiction, like quick, you know? And it all kind of traced back, like I said, like when I was smoking weed and just drinking, like, you know, in high school, it wasn't a big deal. But then like there, with that being said, there was still that progression, you know? So for about 10 years of my life, dude, I was fully strung out on dope. And it led me to being just super broken. I tried to manage it. I tried to figure out like different ways to try to keep it kind of not under control, but just manage my life at the same time using drugs. And so, dude, it eventually led me down to being homelessness and like fully like eating out of trash cans, like living in community parks, like living in the canyon behind the, you know, the park and stuff. And then I would make attempts to get clean. This is a little bit later when I was starting to get kind of beat up, and I would go to treatment, like I would go to rehab. And I would do little stints there. I've been to rehab like a total of like five or six times. And I would make an attempt to get clean, and then it wouldn't stick. And cause I wasn't done, like I had to get done. And this is my biggest encouragement. And it sounds kind of messed up, but like my biggest encouragement for anyone in the audience that is maybe struggling with addiction, or if you guys know anyone that struggles with addiction, is like the best thing for me was to get done. Like I had to get so much pain. That's really my biggest advice, is like go get so much pain that you're willing to kind of hit that rock bottom and then just surrender and like give up, you know? I got to a point where I was like I said, it went to treatment like 5 times, and I went to jail a couple times. I was incarcerated just from like getting caught with drugs on me, like possession of having, you know, of drugs on me. And that's where I hit my bottom. I was locked up, and I was in jail, and I'm like, hey, and I remember having this like spiritual warfare going on in my mind. I'm like, okay, I could stay in here for like, you know, however long, the next couple weeks or whatever, and then get out and then go back to getting my swerve on and like, you know, go get high some more. Or option B is I had the option, because I got in touch with a buddy of mine who he runs a treatment center, which I had been to before, some like in the recent past before that time. So I was like, okay, 2 options. I could like, you know, stick it out for the next couple of weeks and then get out and just, you know, continue what I'm trying to do, try to manage my life on drugs. Or second option is like, get out of here and go back to treatment and like, you know, get this thing. So there was like, they say, you ever heard the term like having a moment of clarity? So that was the case for me. I think it was a supernatural thing. And I've had like spiritual experiences before trying to get clean, but this one was like pretty profound. It was like, you know what it was, bro? I had the thought in my mind. I truly realized that if I kept going the way I was going, I was going to die. Like straight up. I'm like, because I was going so hard with like the way I was using, and I'm like, if I keep going like this, like I'm going to die. You know, I'm like that kind of freaked me out. Cause I was so clear. Whatever supernatural moment of clarity type of thing that was. So I'm like, you know what? I'm like, dude, screw it. Like I'm going to get out of here, go back to treatment again. And, fast forward 8 years later. So wow. Yeah, this next month, actually, I'm celebrating 8 years sober.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, bro. Yeah. So super, super humbled and grateful for my recovery. I tell, when I have this conversation with people, I like to say that, the most important part of my life is my recovery. Okay. And the most important part of my recovery is my spiritual health, my relationship with God. Like literally, I try my absolute best to be as quick as I possibly can to give the Lord credit, to give him credit for my sobriety. Because I did some work, like I worked some steps to get it, but it all circles back to honoring the Lord. Because if it wasn't for my spiritual experience and him like rescuing me out of that despair, like I probably would be dead, you know? So
100%, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're that deep, I feel like you need something bigger than you for sure. Because you can't do it on your own.
you can't, there has to be some type of spiritual experience. Like that's what we teach in recovery. Like without a spiritual experience, it's basically impossible to have long-term sobriety, you know?
Because you just kind of fall back into it.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It has to be literally something like supernatural that comes in and like, you know, takes you out of that.
Yeah.
It's pretty deep to think about.
Yeah, no, it is, man. I had I had issues with drugs, but not on the extent and the level that you had. When I was in high school, I kind of like, it's funny, I was like very straight and narrow, like all of like elementary, middle school, and high school, most of high school. I remember, I don't know, did you have those DARE classes where the cops would show up?
Yeah, that was back
and they'd be like, don't do heroin, don't.
They try to like scare you from.
Yeah. It's actually funny because research came out that actually invoked more drug use because they were like showing people what the drug looked like, you know, where to get it. Like that's not crazy. Directly, but by saying don't go here to go get this, you're saying you can go get it right here, kind of thing. That's why they don't have that.
I think as a kid too, it like because when you're a kid, if someone tells you like don't do that, like it makes you want to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it actually was an issue. That's why they don't do them anymore.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I remember going through all that, and then I personally my grandfather, he died from lung cancer because he smoked cigarettes. So then I was just like, for me, I just thought like all drugs gave you cancer kind of growing up. So I was like, oh, you know, I'm not going to do drugs. And then it was in high school where, like middle school, all my friends were doing drugs. High school was where everybody was drinking, doing more drugs. And, I wouldn't even drink, dude. I didn't like to drink. I didn't think it was that good. But like the way I saw it as the older I got was like, oh, like, you know, my brain is like my most valuable asset. Like I need to protect it because I know there's certain drugs that mess up your brain permanently. Sure. So then I was very like, kind of like straight and narrow. Like all my friends we would go out, we'd go do things, and they want to do drugs, and I was like, nah, I'm good. And I was the only one in the friend group who never did drugs. But it wasn't until my sophomore year, mid-sophomore year, my life got really hard. Was where I was like, you know what? I was like, screw it. I'm gonna try weed for the first time. And coincidentally, the person who that I tried it from was Lewis, you know, our mutual friend. Because his dad came to California, got like all these weed lollipops, came back, and then Lewis took some and he gave it to all of us. Like we broke them up, and then he gave it to all. And I didn't really care. I was like, I'll keep it in my backpack. Yeah. I kept it in my backpack for weeks, and then I ate that lollipop, and that was the first time I did drugs, and it was a weird experience because it was edible, and I was like, I don't recommend like doing drugs at all. But if you were to do it the first time, edible is not the way to go. And then I ended up kind of like. Just I thought it was weird, whatever. But that kind of like opened that door.
Did you get stoned?
I did, yeah. And I was at church, like coincidentally, dude. I was thinking like I didn't know what was gonna happen, but and then I ended up kind of telling myself I'm not doing that again. But I had a whole bunch of my friends who were like, you know, smoking weed. So I was like, you know what? Let me try smoking it instead of eating it. Mm-hmm. So again, it opened that door to then, you know, put my defenses down to do it. And I was like, whatever, like, you know, things weren't great at home. Things weren't great in school academically. And then like, I just got like my heart broken by this girl. So it's like, it was just like a chaotic storm to be able to just like really, I was vulnerable. And then the people around me were just kind of like, already doing it. So I went down that hole, and then I tell people I have like a very like addictive personality. I feel like I'm not like it can be negative, but like, you know, like if I love shoes, I'm gonna get a whole bunch of shoes.
Like all in.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I love doing one thing, I'm gonna do a lot of it. I'm gonna, you know, like that's what I like to do, right? So I liked the experience of weed, and I smoked so much. I always had a lot of weed on me. But I kind of like moved my line a little bit. I was like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna do drugs, but I'm not gonna do any drugs that are like not natural. Mm-hmm. So I'd only do weed, and then I was only open to doing like shrooms, like if I were to ever do anything different. And then I ended up pretty much doing like I had to like this whole battle like with my mom, like trying to find like she knew I was doing drugs, but she couldn't prove it because I was always like, you know, like trying to stay one step ahead of her. Yeah. And then I was like partying, doing all these things, and I kind of was in a very rebellious stage of my life, and pretty much went down the line of like telling myself like, oh, like I'm not addicted, like I can stop whenever, I'll take breaks here and there. but I'd always start again, so like it was never really like something I ever overcame. And then it wasn't until I realized in high school, like my senior year, that I was like, you know what, like I was able to get by high school, like academically, like I didn't do as great anymore, but I was able to make it look like I was doing great on paper. Like I just cheated really well. It's pretty much like what I was doing, right? So on paper, it looked like I was a great academic, but I actually wasn't that smart. And then I didn't really have a lot of chances to get into college. And then I didn't really want to go into college either. Plus, like, I wasn't about to do school for another 4 more years, but pay for it. So I was like, I need to do something with my life. And I saw a lot of my friends because I was good friends with seniors when I was like a sophomore, and it was like just made everything accessible. They had jobs, they had cars, so they were always like they were either drug dealers, and then they would always pick me up and like smoke me out. Like, so it was always like kind of fun to be around the older crowd.
Yeah.
But I noticed by the time I was a senior, these guys were out of school for like 2-3 years, and a lot of them were doing the same thing. Still like, still selling drugs, still doing the same. And I was like, man, I really don't want to be like these guys.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to leave. And then the only way I could leave was, I didn't have any money, and I didn't have scholarships or anything. So I was to join the Marine Corps, and it was something I've always wanted to do. But it wasn't until I decided that I wanted to do that I was okay, well, I have to get my stuff together. I got to actually clean up. And then I ended up, it was actually a little hard for me to kick the addiction of weed, because I literally embedded my whole life around it. Like everything I did, like everybody loved to be around me because I always had a lot of weed.
Yeah.
I had a car and I had weed, and then I was always like available. Like I never wanted to be home. So I would like pack my day into like smoking with like probably 10 people a day, 10 different people. I'd pick them up, we'd go to a park, smoke, and then by the time they got to go home, I go do the same thing with somebody else. And then I wouldn't come home till like maybe 2-3 a.m. Right. So I would always find things to do, and my whole life revolved around it. I was probably, high more than I was sober throughout the day. And so for me to kick it was to kick my whole, like my whole habit, my whole life. So it was a little hard.
I had to do a new lifestyle. Yeah,
exactly. So I ended up doing shrooms. And then I had kind of like that experience, but it wasn't like 100% like organic, because it's not like, it wasn't like a God experience. It was a more of a emulation of what it could be. That's why a lot of people like shrooms and they feel very spiritual on them, because it's emulation of what God does. But I was able to stop smoking weed, and then I kind of got my life together. I lost a lot of friends, not necessarily like nobody wanted to be my friend, but I just didn't have any reason to hang out, because all they wanted to do was smoke weed. And got into fitness because I had to get get a certain score to get into the Marine Corps, all stuff.
Sure.
And then, but then I was like, I figured out like shrooms doesn't pop up on a drug test. So then I got really like hooked on shrooms, although it's not like an addictive drug. And then also you can't do it as much because it eventually just loses its touch. So I had to spread it out on how much I did it, but I did it a lot more than most people would have, because I had that addictive.
I went through a phase where I was like big into like psychedelics and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would do it extremely. Again, the same addictive personality, just a different focus.
Yeah.
And then I did that, and then I pushed my line. Then okay, well, I'll only do psychedelics. So I'm open to shrooms, LSD.
I'm
DMT.
only gonna trip balls.
Yeah, exactly, right. Literally, yeah, and literally, bro. And then I would always try to, and then everybody thought it was like, because at least where I'm from here, I've realized in California, it's almost common, but in Florida, it's not as common. At least, I mean, maybe now it is, but I would always try to find friends to trip with, and people thought I was like crazy. I'm like, bro, you're out here like doing lean, and you're calling me crazy, I'm like, but again, we all had our issues, but it wasn't until I joined the Marine Corps where I was forced to, like, I didn't have access to drugs, and then fast forward to 6 years later, well, technically 5 years, I had a 5-year contract. I got out, and then now, I run my own business, so I don't need to get drug tested. And I had the option for the first time to go back to doing drugs, because there's nothing holding me back from it.
Yeah.
And I'm in California, the weed is apparently really good out here, all this stuff. And I thought I wouldn't be telling the truth if I said I never thought about it, if I didn't consider it. Like, maybe let's just try, or maybe maybe, and then obviously I'm a Christian too at this time in my life. So it was very conflicting.
Yeah.
Like, I was trying to use all those justifications, like, oh, well, if God made it, all these things. And but I was really trying to justify trying to try it, because I was like, oh, I've always wanted to try Cali weed, blah, blah, blah. Ultimately, I made the decision not to because, again, I still have that addictive personality, and I was like,
That's good.
I'm trying to build a business. I'm trying to do all these things. My life,
Discernment, bro.
yeah, my life is so hectic. I was like, why would I want to open that door?
Yeah.
If I don't even know, like, I can't tell you for sure if I could close it on my own. So I'm like, why would I like throw on that extra baggage on my life?
Totally.
Like willingly, you know what I mean? It's something I already overcame. So, I decided not to.
Yeah.
And then so, fast forward now, like obviously, like, I don't do any drugs, but I relate with people who do or who have.
Yeah.
But my question is, for you, did you see like you're using drugs as an outlet because you felt like you were running away from something? Kind of what was that for you?
Yeah, totally. So I think for me, it was just a sense of escape. Even now, I've done all the step work and processing it. I'm not even quite sure what I was trying to escape, but whatever reality, like whatever sober state of mind, like, dude, like it was like years and years and years. Like I couldn't look back to see like one single day where I like didn't have to do some type of pill or drink or whatever, because it was like, I just wasn't okay with just being in my own self, like having a sober state of mind, So with that being said, there was obviously it was just this escapism,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just the physical euphoria and the way that it made me feel. A lot of people make some type of connection to like childhood trauma. Again, everyone, like I said, everyone has some type of dysfunction in their upbringing. I didn't really have any like crazy childhood trauma, but perhaps there was some type of some level of dysfunction that I was, maybe even subconsciously, not even really knowing from my youth that I, carried with me to that season of life where I was like got super involved in that. But people like ask that question. It's like, okay, you ask a drug addict, like, okay, like why do you get high? Like why do you get high every single day? And the initial response is to be like, oh, I just like the way it makes me feel. Like it makes me feel great, but you peel back the layers of the onion, and like there's definitely some after doing, I call it heart work. It's a series of work. It's work, like straight up. And when I first got into recovery, I didn't want to do the work. It reminded me, I had like flashbacks to like school and like academics and high school. I didn't do good in high. I didn't like school. I was too high energy. I couldn't sit still. I was super hyper all the time. And I barely graduated, school wasn't really my thing. And so I got into recovery, and they were like, they were like, you gotta do some work, like you gotta do these steps, and there's like writing involved and reading, and it reminded me of like school, and I'm like, that's lame, I don't want to do it. Like, can you guys just like teach me how to stay clean without having to like do the inventory and the steps and making amends and like doing all this stuff. And they're like, no, dude, like if you're serious about staying sober long term, like you got to do work. And like I said, I call it heart work. So I guess to tie it back to what you were saying is like definitely through that process of my healing journey, I've been able to definitely discover like what it was as in my youth. Maybe that what were there were certain things that I was running from or escaping from or didn't want to think about. But it's like, I think your story is really cool, and thank you for sharing that with me, by the way. And I think that's a really good example. Like your story is, I love to hear you share about your experience in the military, and thank you for your service. Seriously, I know I've told you that before, but so cool. And really good example. I've had many friends that they similar stories. Like they were like getting buck wild in their life, and then they like signed up for the military, and like the military helped them to find discipline and how to be kind of like teach those like those skill sets of like how to be a man, how to be do the right thing, integrity, especially I know especially in the Marines. Marines are really big on like core values, right? I was never in the service, but I do know that that's a big thing for, again, specifically the Marines having those core values. And so I love to hear how you kind of had that experience and that helped you. Like your experience in the military helped you to find whatever it was to kind of give you that structure, and to be able to live like a healthy life after that. So
it really was more of like a kind of like a forced like detox in a way, because I feel like at least I'm not an expert or anything, but when it comes to addiction, at least what I found with addiction, there's the physical aspect of like a drug having a physical hold on you, or alcohol or food or whatever, and then there's a psychological aspect. When you cut off the physical aspect first, like especially for example like nicotine or heroin, you have your withdrawals and all these things, but there's a certain point where your body is actually overcome it. And when you can do that, you're 50% there. So the Marine Corps was kind of like that for me, where I had no access. I was unable to, do drugs because I got drug tested, plus the fear of losing, my benefits and all these things, all the years that I put in. All that really was that like isolation that allowed my body to not necessarily desire those things. And then the second aspect was the mental aspect. Then the mental aspect, it was in the Marine Corps, they do teach a lot of like self-discipline, all these things. And so that helped me give me the basic tools to be able to, when I had the choice, when I got out, to then actually make the right choice. A lot of people who are in the Marine Corps, they're really good at they're not necessarily good at having the self-discipline, having the integrity and all that stuff. They're really good at just following the orders to do so. But once they leave and they don't have to follow those orders, it's almost like, it kind of goes out the window.
Totally.
So, but I was in, 5 years, it gave me enough time to really make that decision. Cause I mean, I remember when I just got in, I was like, man, I can't wait till I get out. I'm going to go do all these drugs. Like I was counting down. And as the day got closer and, at the same time, my relationship with God was revived, and I was more involved in my community within my church, and my spiritual health was just kind of like growing and all these things. So then that really, when that transition happened, was really my my bridge, or really just my support to be able to make the right decision. Because if I didn't have that, if you remove that element, I would have just gone back to drugs. To be honest, like because I'd never addressed the real reason why I went into drugs until I was, until I was born again as a Christian. And I love your answer in the aspect of like, you knew you were running away from something. A lot of times it is like a more of a subconscious thing. I feel like a lot of people look for the answers of like, oh, like I had this one thing happen to me and it just ruined everything for me and it became like a downward spiral. But what I feel like is more relatable is exactly what you said. Like a lot of times, especially as teenagers, is when people mostly get into drugs, is we tend to allow like these little things. They're not like, in the moment they feel like they're everything to us because we don't have a lot going on in our lives. But we allow these little things, and a lot of times we don't even remember what they were. We just remember how they made us feel. Make decisions like doing drugs, and then that opens up that door, and then that door becomes a spiral down effect. So then when you go back and say, what was it? You're like, I don't really know. I just know that I didn't like the way I felt. And so I supplemented.
Totally.
And so
even
that's
you're like a really, really young age. Like I think of like my daughter, and like I have a 1-year-old daughter now. I know you have baby Ion Stud. And I think of them. Like I think of my daughter. I'm like, dude, I want to do. It makes me want to really love her, and tend to her, and like I always want to make sure she feels like just really like highly loved, because I think it starts even when we even have. Some trauma can start even before we have our first memories. When we're like India's age, 1 or 2, and it's like that really as we grow in our lives. And most of it it's parenting, right? The stuff that we observe, the stuff that's modeled from our parents. We're taking that in, like, right? We're born with like a blank slate, right? That's why it's so cool. You see babies like baby Ion right now. He has no fears, like zero fear. Which is like so crazy to think about, because there's nothing that has happened to him in his life that has put stuff in his mind that has made him have any sense of fear, because he doesn't really need that. But eventually we go through life having experiences and stuff like startles us, or stuff we realize is bad, or there's negative consequences. So we develop our mindset around kind of the world as we go through this path that we're on.
Yeah.
And so it makes me, again, just think of it now, I'm like on this whole trip of like, you know, being a dad. I'm like, I really want to be adamant about, and I'm not perfect, dude. I'm still, like I said, 8 years sober, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, dude, I'm still a work in progress. You know, I still, some old behavior sometimes comes, like if I was being honest, dude, like stuff comes up and I'm like, I get like stupid thoughts in my mind, you know, and I get kind of funky sometimes. I'll go into like sometimes I get anxious, you know, just being real. And so I'm like, I'm like into personal development and growth. I've taken on a growth mentality. Yeah. But there's still stuff that comes up that I got to work. That work I was mentioning, that heart work and doing that type of work. Like I still have to do that on a daily basis, you know? So yeah, still like, I think it's a never ending process of development. I'm so thankful I discovered the world of personal development, you know? Yeah. And I was also going to include, like, I know that you're into personal development as well, and that whole realm. And so it's super interesting to me to see how people like you and myself like discovered that whole concept. And like for me, it was, you know, my journey with recovery. Like that was kind of my introduction to self-development, was from getting clean. For you, it sounds like it was the same. Also, like the military. Sounds like in my assessment, it seems like the military was really like your intro to personal development. Yeah, which is so cool.
I feel like
and it's wild because everyone has their own life experience that ended up being their own intro to that realm. It's pretty crazy, you know.
That's like the introduction to personal development. I feel like for me, I feel like I've always was very interested in like personal development. I feel like when I was younger, I was very like self-aware, but I never had anything to apply it to, and because I never had any role models, and nobody ever talked about like personal development, anything like that growing up. And then I remember it was like when I had like a shroom trip, like I literally sat in like my bathroom for like 2 hours, like staring at myself, like as if I was somebody else, to like really examine who I am. Yeah, like I'm like, who am I? Like, what do I want to be looked at? Like trying to really see what that was like, in the aspect of like, you know, am I being intentional about my life? Am I just, you know, and that was one of the things where I realized, you know, I wasn't doing the best that I could have done in high school. Although I wasn't great academically, like the internet was still a thing. I could have been building a business. I wish I was I started a business when I was in high school and I didn't actually pursue it because I was so into drugs. And, although like, you know, I'm doing pretty decent right now within my business, but you know, I always look back. I'm like, what could have been if I really just, you know, actually started the work earlier. But for me, I had lack of role models. And then, when I joined the Marine Corps, I had more role models. You know, they weren't perfect, but it was more than I had. And then, from there, I started to realize more of like, okay, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And then actually starting to realize, what is it that I want to become? I had more clarity on that. And then I kind of went into the aspect of thinking of like, what does that roadmap look like? I wanted like YouTube videos, started reading books, and then went down that whole rabbit hole of like, you know, that whole self-help thing, and went into entrepreneurship through that. And it really was, for sure, the Marine Corps propelled that for me. Yeah. Because I had more resources too. And then I actually just kind of went down that hole. And then at the same time that I was going down that hole, I was actually, I ended up, you know, having my relationship with Jesus kind of like spark up again, because I realized that there was an alignment, you know, like how I started reading all these self-help books like Think and Grow Rich and the Secret and all these things. And I was really into all that. And then I realized that when I was reading the Bible, because I grew up Christian and I knew the Bible in and out, but I never looked at it as I only looked at it as more of like a one-dimensional like piece of paper and words. I never thought there was like more to it. Like I thought it was just like, you gotta cite like this
relational.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, but when I kind of went down the self-help rabbit hole, and then at the same time kind of had that intersection of where Jesus was reintroduced into my life, and then I was reading certain scriptures, and I realized how all this stuff from self-help and that whole lifestyle of self-improvement is literally the same exact thing.
Wow, yeah.
The only difference is that they rip out God from it. They call it the universe, they call it whatever, whatever it is, they just replace it.
Yeah.
But the fundamentals, the basics, and the principles are all the same.
A lot of the same principles, for sure, yeah.
So that's how it kind of started with.
And having that discernment, right? Having that balance to know that, right?
Yeah.
And as believers, like still appreciating, the personal development world, but then also like making sure that we're staying on point with having our faith, So I think like it's people like you and many of my friends that have like been able to find that groove. I think leads to like a really, fruitful life.
100%, man. Cause there is a lot of, it's like, I think what personal development does really well is it takes these biblical principles and it makes it more, to today's day and age. Like, the Bible is extremely relevant, which is impressive. The fact that it's over 2,000 years old and it's relevant to today. And, we have AI and all this technology and this book is still extremely relevant. But I think what it does is it takes it, into today's world and makes it a little bit more digestible.
Yeah.
But again, it's all the same. It's coming from that one source. But where I think that it falls short is where it removes God out of it.
Totally.
Yeah, that's kind of.
And a lot of my like personal favorite, I call them mentors, even though I've never met them, but like via, their books and the content I've found from them online, they're like, I consider them my mentors because it's like, why not, people, I was going to say my favorite, like the legends in the personal development space. Yeah. My personal favorites, like they tend to be believers because I have a next level of appreciation for their message, so people like, Zig Ziglar, Eric Thomas, Ed Milet, like these dudes are like on fire for the Lord, and I like the way that they convey that message in a way that's like not spiritually arrogant. So they're still able to, speak to a large audience, but then also like are very real and effective with the way that they bring the truth like that,
100%. I do notice the same thing where there's a lot of people in the personal development world. And you can see there's a difference in the ones that have that understanding, which is really interesting because
they're like extra, fulfilled. It seems like.
And they have more of a profound understanding, and I think it just like it hits harder. Even if you're not like Christian, like you would never even know. There's a lot of people who I know love like Jordan Peterson, but I would never know that he believes in Jesus. Until obviously now he talks more about it, but he knows how to. Like with the mix of what he knows plus that deeper understanding, I think really makes a great combination. And
he's deep.
It makes
he's super deep.
Yeah, he is. He's awesome, man. I love.
He's legit.
He really is. And I think that the same thing.
Really good voice for our generation.
Oh yeah,
sure. Especially with men.
Especially what's happening now. Like, and I think I've noticed that trend too, because if you look at throughout history, 90% of the top scientists were all Christian. And they're the ones who made the biggest impact in our society. And I think it's because a lot of times people correlate like being a Christian actually kind of like hinders you in whatever it is, whether it's science, business or whatever. But I think it's the total opposite because the origin and the true source, you have a different level of awareness, advantage, all these things. And it really, I've noticed that for sure. I like that you brought that up, man. But I love that.
That's heavy. That's a great thought.
Yeah, no, I think that, and you'll notice it too. Like within, like we're more deeply involved in the Christian community, so sometimes when you're in it, becomes your normal. Yeah. But I like to like try to remember like how it was when I was, because again, like I did the same thing. I was really into all these guys, and the guys that really stuck the most, like that what they said was like more profound. Yeah. I've realized looking back, like, this guy was Christian, and then I'm always like, wow, that's surprising, but I'm also not surprised at this point, Totally. And it's really cool to see, man. And I like that.
You can tell the difference, man. Even like when you just meet anyone, like in public, or when you make a new friend, like when someone's truly operating under that sense of grace, like there's a certain energy about them, and it's like a really special thing. It's really unique. And I think it's seen, you notice it even more like once you're walking in your faith, and so it's really interesting to think about that.
That's awesome, man. How was it for you, man? How did you, I know you had recovery and you said that God got you through it. Was it like through your recovery that you found God? Did you grow up Christian? How was that for you?
Totally. Yeah. So I grew up in a house where there was faith for sure. My parents actually were into the Catholic thing.
Oh yeah, no, me too, bro.
Yeah, that was when I was like really young. Thankfully, they made some friends with people that were like down for the Lord, and so they were like became more like they started going to like a Baptist church, which is awesome. Yeah. And then so ever since I've been young, dude, I've always believed in God. I've always had faith. Always felt like I have a creator, right? Like there's a God that like has designed the universe, and who's like all powerful and like oversees everything. And I even felt like I'm like loved by God, but it never seemed like I had a personal relationship with Him, And so it took me, for me again, I had to go through a lot of pain and discomfort and like strife in order to finally surrender to the point where I kind of had to be like, okay, I think a good question at a certain point that I had asked myself is like, what's going to be different this time? Like how is because I think sometimes like faith, like many things in life, but like our view that we have with God, it kind of seems like the same for like years, even from when we're like a kid. It kind of just like doesn't really develop much. It's kind of just stays the same. And I still pray this to this day, like from time to time. I ask God, I'm like, Lord, help me to set aside some stuff that I think I know, but maybe I could be like off with, so I can have a new experience, And I felt like that's one of my prayers is like, God, reveal yourself in ways to me that I wasn't aware, that I didn't know of before. Because I want my faith to seem fresh. I think like many Christians, their faith gets boring because it's like they go the same, they like church on Sunday, they have their same like devotionals and small group, which is great. Like to do those things consistently is great, but like how powerful is to like go to your prayer space and be like, Lord, reveal yourself in a way that like you haven't yet before. Like that's pretty powerful if you think about it. Because I want it to be fresh, And I think God wants that for us too. He wants our faith to seem like fresh, and there's like a sense of newness to it, because then it makes it more fun, and it makes it more life filled,
and more enjoyable.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'm on the same page, because like I feel like the people who, and I've fallen into this aspect to where I put God in a box and into a routine where I've lost that freshness, that newness. But I've realized every time where there is that freshness and that newness is where the most appreciation and the most, I guess the deeper my understanding for God kind of grows. Whereas is in that aspect where I didn't see that coming, or I didn't realize that. Yeah. Because it is new. And it really is. And I feel like that's how you really develop a relationship. Like if you look at it with like, let's say like a marriage, right? If you consistently do the same thing every single day, it stale really quick.
You get stagnant. Yeah,
exactly. So why would you do that with God and expect, something different?
Great perspective.
And for me, like what always gets me is every time, whether somebody tells me a testimony and how I was somewhat involved in it, or how, God, put these pieces together that were, like happening simultaneously over the course of 3 years. And it like the breakthrough happens and I get to kind of see the unraveling of that. Like that stuff, like just amazes me on how God is so great that he can consistently blow our minds, even though we already know that he's going to blow our minds. Like that's already, if you think about it as a task in its own, like if someone says, hey, like I'm going to tell you that no matter what I'm going to do, I'm always going to blow your mind, and you know that, and I'm still going to blow your mind. Like that's actually really hard to do. You know what I'm saying? And I was
there's like still a surprise element.
Yeah, like, and you already know it's coming, but it still surprises you anyways. And how and I think that no one can do that besides God, and it really just shows the genius of God. And and that stuff always, even like the simple stuff of like when I go on hikes, and it's like, wow, like how this earth is operating consistently at this level, and these people on it are doing these things, and that stuff like is how do you like I find it hard to run a business of like 7 people, what I'm saying? Like how can you run a universe and a globe of like 7 billion, what I mean? So it's crazy to really just, I always like to always shift my perspective in that, because it helps refresh that for me. and it keeps that almost like that kid-like curiosity and amazement. You know what I mean? Like when a kid sees something for the first time, you know, you take them to like go see like a lion. You've probably seen a lion like maybe 5 times, and you're just no longer amused, but your kid is like, oh my God, like has that amazement that it's fresh, and that memory becomes a core memory for them. I feel like God, if you allow it, God does that with you consistently.
Sure.
And I love that you say that, man. I that's something that I always strive to do as well. Like, and I love that, man. I love that you shared your story with me, and up to the point of you know, really shifting and really recovering, bro. Like that's one of those things that I feel like is one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah.
And you were in it for a long time, dude. A decade is a long time, and you know, 100%, bro. Like really proud of you for doing that, man.
Thanks,
like
man.
It's hard. Like it's really hard, and
I'm just I literally I'm just glad I made it out alive.
Yeah.
You know, like I have a lot of friends that they didn't, like they overdosed, you know, like nowadays this like whole fentanyl stuff is crazy. It's like I still insane. Bro, literally I see like probably once, like literally like probably once a month I see a Facebook post where someone like died, like passed away from an overdose, you know. And it's like someone I know, like someone in my recovery community.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sheesh. It seems like more and more these days, because the fentanyl
it's
epidemic is definitely like real, you know. And so I you know, I think of like, you know, my people in my life that love me, and that I love them as well, you know, like my mom and and my dad, my wife, my you know, like my immediate family, and my closest friends. I'm like, dude, I stay sober for me. Like, I'm on this path for me, but also a byproduct of that is I know, like, I want my wife to be proud of me, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And I want my family to be proud of me, you know, because of stuff that I especially like with my family, I've put people in my life, I've put them through hell, you know, when I was going through it, when I was being a knucklehead. So I'm like, the best way to bless, I think about like my mom, right? The best way I can bless my mom is like just stay sober. You know, and like when I was in the process of making amends to her, like it's the same situation. I'm like, hey, what can I do to make it right? You know, that's basically how that goes. Is like, hey, I know I've been stupid in the past. Like, what can I do? What are like the actions I can do to make it right? You know, and that's the same. That's the response is like, just stay sober. You know, so it's I'm super grateful, man. And like I said, I'm not perfect. I'm human, so I still like fall short. I still make mistakes like from time to time. Not with like staying sober. My recovery game is pretty strong. Like I said, bro, if I go back out, like I know I'll die. Like,
for sure.
So I'll go straight back to like going pedal to the metal. So I just know myself, like, maybe I could, like you mentioned, dabbling with a little weed or whatever, you know, like even if that maybe I could have like a drink, you know, like I'll be out with friends and they're like, hey dude, like have a drink. Like, can you like, well, most people don't say that because that would be kind of like maybe a little rude, but because most of my friends know that I'm sober and stuff. But sometimes people ask me, they're like, hey, like, could you like, they just are out of curiosity. And I totally like respect their that question. Is like they're like, hey Jake, if you wanted to, like, could you have a drink, or maybe later down the line, do you think that you could like enjoy like a cocktail or whatever? And my response to that is, yeah, maybe I could, you know, but I just know myself. Like you mentioned that addictive personality. I just know myself, man, you know, and like one thing I know will lead to the next, you know, and what ends up being like a cocktail will turn into like 5 cocktails, and then I'm like doing a line of cocaine, and then I'm like going back to TJ, and I'm like fully strung out within a week. You know what I mean? So I stay away. Like it's what we teach in recovery is just complete abstinence. That's kind of the whole get down. So I believe I'm a recovered addict. Like I'm a recovered alcoholic. But I try to stay on that road of complete abstinence, because and I like it, bro. Like having a clear headspace, like it and not having to be like always chasing the next buzz or the next thing. Yeah, like there's freedom in that.
I agree. Yeah.
There's a lot of freedom in that. I feel very fortunate that I was able to find that, and no offense, we call them normies or people that like most of my friends, like they like to drink, have a couple drinks or have a beer, whatever. Like it doesn't, I'm like, all power to you, like enjoy it. I tell people like enjoy it. But for someone like myself who just has that history of bondage with it, I'm like, since I've been like liberated from that, I'm like, I'm just gonna stay on this path because I like it, and it's I think it's just good for me,
I agree, man. I don't drink either. I mean, I'll drink from time to time, but not out of like, I don't find enjoyment out of it. But I agree, man. I think that like I don't even drink coffee. Like I don't even do any of that. So
yeah, I'm definitely drinking coffee.
That's so funny. Huh?
I'm definitely drinking a lot of that.
But yeah,
you don't even do the caffeine thing.
No, dude, it's not necessarily because like I'm not like on this like, oh, like his caffeine is, but I just don't need it.
Totally.
At least right now.
Good for you, man.
I feel like I'm fairly young and I don't think I need it. Like I don't really enjoy it either.
Yeah, you're more sober than I am, bro.
I know on that caffeine, right? So, but yeah, dude, I love that you said that you overcame it, and you said that you at least came out alive. But I think that you didn't at least just come out alive. You've built a great life for yourself. You're doing really well in your business and
trying, bro.
Have a beautiful family and a beautiful home. Like, so it's not like you just like made it out alive and now you're just living a mediocre life that's sober. You've 10x, and I kind of want to talk about a little bit of that.
Yeah.
How did you get into the solar industry? What was that like for you? Kind of what things you learned from it, and
totally
how things are going now for you.
Yeah, so I love that question. I'll actually kind of bring it back a little bit further. Talking about my recovery and stuff like that. So 8 years ago, I was in treatment, right, like for the last time, and it finally stuck. Thank God. And then I actually transitioned out of that, and I lived in a sober living, lived in a sober living house, and that was super good for me. I lived there for like a whole year. And then after that, I started to work at that treatment center that I went through. Great friends of mine that run it. And so I was doing that. I did that for 2 years. So I worked there. I actually at that point was managing a different sober living house. It was like a bigger one. It was like an outpatient house.
Yeah.
To where the guys that were living there. So they lived, the dudes lived there. And then they during the day, I would drive them to like an office to where they would do like meetings, where they would do like groups like with their counselors and stuff like that. So I did that for 2 years, and that like honestly that taught me a lot. That about when it comes to like leadership, that taught me a lot. That was like huge for me. I did that for 2 years, and then I was not really making much of like I was making just a really small income from that. So I was managing that sober living house. And then in the evening, I started driving Uber. So I was driving Uber and doing that for a while, but that was like the struggle. Like, I don't know if you know too much about Uber, but it's like really tough to like actually make decent income from it. Like you really have to bro, I was driving even a little bit further after that. So I transitioned out of that house and I got my own place, my little studio. And I was just driving Uber full time, bro. I would drive like 40 hours.
Oh my God.
A week and make like $1,000 in a week. Like if I made $1,000 in a week, that was like good. That was like really good.
Yeah.
And I was like, so
yeah. Plus you got to pay gas and
dude, it's crazy. I had a Prius. I had a Toyota Prius, so that helps.
Okay, at least that helps. Yeah.
But bro, I remember coming back home, and I would drive late. I would drive at like, especially on the weekends, because that's when it's like the most busiest. Like, picking up people from like PB and downtown and stuff, like 2 a.m. That's when it's like popping. So I would drive late. I would drive like 2, 3 a.m. And I remember coming back home to my studio, and I was like, I parked my car, and like there was one evening specifically. Talk about another like moment of clarity, type of like revelation type of moment. You have those like moments in your life, right?
Yeah.
And I remember walking. It was like middle, super late at night. I was walking back into my place, and I just remember having this inner like stirring in my spirit of like, I know I'm capable of more. Like I know I'm worth more, and I have I was newly sober, right? I was like, at that point, like 2 years sober, right? So I like picked up some traction. I'm like, I'm getting into more and more into personal development, right? So I'm like, I'm on this path, but I'm like, I know, and this is a good learning lesson right here. My personal development was going like this, but my income wasn't. And it naturally, bro, there's this like crazy magical thing. Like it's inevitable. Like if you're bettering your life and you're growing in your life, the income will match. The income will eventually, it will match that. Like they say, income rarely surpasses personal development. Like it typically matches it. Right. So anyway, around that same time, I was starting to go to a new church, Awaken Church. That's where I met you. Shout out to Awaken. Love our church community. So awesome. And so at our church, that's where I made friends with Jordan Matesius and John Soriano, and they were like kind of newer in the solar space themselves. This was about 5 years ago. I had met them, and they were trying to recruit me into the business, but I was like hesitant because they were like, "Hey, we're doing this thing. It's solar. It's super awesome." I'm like, "Solar panels, like for houses." I'm like, "Sweet, that's awesome, very cool." And then they're like, "We're making like really good money from it." And I'm like, "Okay, tight, right?" I'm in this place in my life where I'm like driving for Uber, like not crushing it, right? So I'm like, okay, like it got the juices flowing, right? And they're like, "Oh, by the way, this solar thing, it's actually door-to-door sales." And I'm like, whoa, I'm like, I'm not down. Like, I don't think that's going to be a good fit for me. That sounds whack. Like, I'm good. But they were, they kept working on me there, as with their recruiting efforts. And so a couple of weeks later, I'm like, you know what? Like, again, I was in this season where I'm like, dude, I'm like, I know I'm capable of doing better for myself, So I'm like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. And I dove into it full time. And dude, I like never thought I would see myself being willing to be a door-to-door sales guy. Like, bro, I tell people like I'm like the last person to get recruited into the business, because it's like it's so far from a traditional job.
It is.
Where everyone on our team is independent contractors. And so it's very entrepreneurial in essence.
It is.
We say what you eat, however much you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. Right. Like you eat what you kill type of thing. It's 100% commission, which is kind of daunting for a lot of people, including myself. When I was getting into it, it was kind of scary, but I was determined, and I didn't have any experience in sales when I first joined, when I first started doing solar. Definitely no door-to-door experience, obviously. But dude, I was hungry, and I was, that's, I think, the one common factor I've seen in a lot of my young friends who are getting into entrepreneurship is like, that's typically the one thing that I observe that pushes people to be determined to win. It's that hunger. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's 100%. That being hungry to like, hey, no matter what happens, like, I'm going to freaking figure this out.
You don't have no choice.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's that inner hunger of like, that's like the best way I can explain it. When I train new guys, when we go out in the field and we're knocking, and I like to make it fun, I'm insistent on, that's kind of a big part of my message when I do training is and get people out in the field is like making it fun. Cause dude, you have to, like life is too short, bro.
You do a great job of that.
Like life is too short to like not have a good time.
That's true.
So like I'll be darned if I'm stuck in a career or a job where like it's like impossible to have fun. Like, dude, you have to make your work fun. Do you agree?
100%.
Like whatever line of work you find yourself, and it can be any line of work. It can be, you can be doing any field, any sector. Yes, it's going to be hard, but that doesn't mean that you can while it's challenging, you can still make it fun.
100%.
And so this is what I like to do, and what I train my team on is like, hey, this job is super challenging because it's door-to-door sales, bro. Like we deal with like it's constant rejection. It's like no, doors getting slammed in your face. Like got to deal with like homeowners coming at you hot, but which, by the way, it's just a numbers game anyway. You know this, you know sales. It's all of sales is just math. It's just a numbers game.
Yeah.
So if you knock enough doors, you're going to find people who are down for the program and so forth. But what I'm trying to say is, dude, I'm insistent, not just in the marketplace, but just in life, dude. That's a big part of my message is like, I am insistent that what I do during my lifetime in this reality and my time on this earth, like I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna enjoy life. I don't think enough people like choose to enjoy this life. Like, dude, I woke up today. Like, just think about that for a second. Like, we have each day is a gift. Like we have the opportunity to live another day of life. Yeah. So like, dude, it's like, if I'm not grateful for that, like I need some type of attitude adjustment or something. You know what I'm saying? So
I agree,
being able to stay, going back to your question of like how I've been able to find, and I feel like I'm just kind of getting started in business, but I would say those two things is actually I would include one more, and I'll share that here in a sec. First is being like insanely hungry. Yeah. Like hunger. The second is learn how to enjoy the process, like make the process like fun and enjoyable. And then the third one I was going to include also is just like straight up gratitude, like living with a sense of like deep gratitude and knowing that we have the opportunity to live another day of life.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love that you said, despite where you're at, like what job you're in, you should make it enjoyable. I mean, like a lot of people don't do that. They kind of like, they feel like, oh, I have my whole day, and then when I'm at work, if I don't like my job, I'll just not enjoy my life for those 8 hours, and then think that they can just kind of turn it on and off. And eventually, like if you look at it, that's like 70% of your day. 70% of your day you're not enjoying. If you look at your whole week, that's the majority of your week you're not enjoying. And if you look at your whole year, so on and so forth. So then tends to bleed into your personal life too. You start to not enjoy that. And I think it is an attitude shift, because you get to choose that. And then even if like, your job sucks, like, we're blessed to live in America. We get to choose our jobs, and and especially the job field that you work in, or the career that you're in, doesn't matter if you have an education, right? You can just kind of join without any experience. Like you said, you did, right? Yeah. I mean, you were a recovering drug addict who was driving Uber and then joined solar.
Yeah. That's what's cool about door to door is like it attracts people from all different types of walks of life. And you don't have to have much, you don't have to have a degree or it's pretty gritty. And so anyone can thrive. I've found that anyone can thrive in the entrepreneurial space as long as you are coachable and have that desire to win. Like you're gonna find a way.
I agree, man. And I think that, and I love that you're in door-to-door sales, because it's like such a I think it's such a like foundational like part of being in business. Whether you continue in door-to-door sales, I think it's such a good thing to just do. I think I call it rejection therapy. Yeah. Where you go in and do something that you're going to get rejected at, consistently. So that way it builds that resilience.
Dude, the skill, I recommend everyone like learn the skill set of selling, because there's so many, like I know you identify with that as well because of your experience in sales. Like I honestly want my kids, like I've told Hannah this, like I want my kids to like learn sales because 100%. Dude, there's so many valuable lessons, and like, dude, overcoming rejection, like how to deal with people. Like that's what most of sales is, just like knowing like to be good with people,
That's true.
Being willing to do hard things, right? Like seeing adversity, and instead of like shying away from it, like going into adversity, right? And like, I can make it happen. There's this like, again, this desire to win, through rejection and like through adversity. That's true. Is the case with in order to be successful in sales. So
no, man, I always tell people who are like, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know like what I want to do. I think the 3 best industries to get into are either door-to-door sales, whether it's solar or you're selling vacuums, real estate, or network marketing, because all those things are extremely hard to do.
Love it.
There's a lot of saturation.
Great fields,
And then it requires all those elements that you're talking about. It requires you to learn how to sell, to learn how to go out there and do something hard, And I feel like it's a great place to start because I know a lot of people, they may want to get into entrepreneurship, but they may not necessarily know what they want to do. They may not, there's different levels of entrepreneurship. They don't know if they want to create a product or service or whatever.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, at least get in one of those three, because by the time you figure it out, you're either going to be really good at one of those or you'll figure something else out, but you at least have the skill set to then do whatever it is you want to do. And I think that, solar is a big one too, because it has a very high commission and it's also like very, I think like, because even with real estate and with network marketing, it's more like, it's more calls than it is really door to door.
Yeah. Cold calling.
Which is just as hard, but I think it's for sure a lot harder to do door to doors because I mean, you're getting rejected to your face. Yeah. And then on top of that, you're physically having to go walk around, so it's literally more of a challenge.
You guys stay in shape.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Get your steps in. So it really, I think, is such a great way for, especially young people, you're, getting out of college, or even if you're about to even graduate high school, and you don't want to go into college, I think it's a great way. This is one of the reasons why I joined the Marine Corps, was to build that resilience, what it feels like to be under pressure and still come out on top. And solar wasn't a thing for me, at least back then, but maybe if I still had that entrepreneurship kind of spirit, and if that was an option, I probably would have taken that route too.
Hey, we're hiring. What's up?
I'm just waiting. I'll submit an application. But yeah, dude. And I think that's, I think it's so great, man. I think it's such a great skill set, because then it's either one or two avenues. Either going to be really good, like how you are right now, you're killing it in your industry, or you're going to be really good, but then you're going to realize, oh, my shifting or my calling is in this area, and then you take all those skills and then apply it there. And I think there's no losing situation unless you quit. That's really the only lose that you have within doing something like that. Yeah. But yeah, man, I think what would be something you'd say to someone who may be either in college, or let's say getting out of high school, and they're thinking of pursuing, let's say solar or some type of sales position, because I know you're amazing at sales. What would you recommend that they do, whether it's, personal development things? What would be your maybe 3 steps to push them in a direction for success?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is, like, I would challenge people to check their friend group. Like, check who are you spending time with first and foremost, because like they say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Mm-hmm. So I would challenge them to, a young person that's like they're trying to figure out what career path to choose or whatever. I would say, before you look at that, like, show me who is your inner circle, because it's likely that whatever friend group you have, like, that's going to be your association or your connection, because it's all about who you know. Like, when it comes to business, it's all about relationships. Like, who do I know that's going to introduce me to this next thing? Show me who is part of your group of peers, and are they pushing you? Are they calling you forward? Are they the type of person that has like a good influence on your life? Are they like motivating you to like lift your lid and like inspire you to be more passionate towards life? Because some people, I think a lot of young people are stuck, and it's like because they like choose to hang around a bunch of bums. And like, dude, that was my life for a while. When I was like younger, like that, like early, like late teens, early 20s, dude, I was a freaking loser. Like, I was a straight up loser. And it was because the people that I was with were like losers as well. Yeah. So that was just like, it's an automatic thing, Yeah. So I think people that are serious about getting into business, I would first and foremost challenge them to get around other people that are also serious about business and pursuing their dream. And maybe it's getting into sales or entrepreneurship or starting a business, whatever that looks like. Like, get around like-minded people, because those are the people that are going to like really call you forward and push you into your destiny.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's good, man. I'd say, like, I agree 100% with you on that. For me, I think that's again one of the reasons why I left Florida, because I'm originally from Fort Lauderdale, was I kind of was looking around and I didn't have anybody who I wanted to emulate. Like, I never saw anybody within my immediate or even distant friend group, or even just, proximity of like who not only that I do life with, but who my parents do life with, that I was like, yeah, I want to be like that. Or I look up.
Probably had role models, but no one that you wanted to like emulate.
Yeah, nobody. I was like, I don't like you either. your finances are terrible. You might have a great marriage, but your finances are terrible. Like there was always like elements missing, and there was never like like anywhere, at least for me, that I could look up to someone or really emulate. But exactly what you're saying, once I kind of got around the right people who were either in that or on their way, it really helped me. And it also helps a lot too when you're kind of hitting those moments of resistance. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like where you want to give up. It's better to have friends who are like, hey, like I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
You got this, versus having like friends who are like, oh, you know, we knew this was gonna fail. Like just chill, and you don't need to be doing all that. You know what I mean? And it makes it easier to keep going. It's kind of like, you know, running a marathon, and the people that you're running with, if you slow down, are they going to help you continue, or are they going to tell you just take a break and, you know, kind of like quit, right? So I agree, man. I think that's one of the biggest things for sure in general in life too.
And like perfect example, I would have never heard about the whole solar opportunity if I didn't start going to church. You know, like that's literally where I heard about it. Yeah. So I think we're extra. We have almost like, I don't want to call it an unfair advantage, but like almost so, like in the market, like we have such a good community at our church. We go to the same church, and like there's so many connections that you can make. Like there's no excuse for like
for you not to have a job, or
dude. There's so many people that are employers or business owners or people that you could partner with. You know,
I agree.
That's how I met you. You know, and so, excuse me, I don't think it should be taken lightly, like our community, you know, like who's in your community, and specifically like who's in your inner circle, because I want to, I'm very intentional about like who I allow like in my life, you know, because I know the power of influence and law of association. And so, dude, I like to hang out with people like you, and people that are like, you know, have big vision and like want to go far and like want to like have a fruitful life and an awesome family. And so dude, that's who I want to spend time with, you know.
I appreciate that, man. I think that it's definitely, you know, one of those things that it kind of feeds itself, you know, because when you're around those people, you become that, and then you feed those people, and it kind of just becomes a really fruitful relationship. And I think those are the kind of the best relationships too, because you know people who are moving in a direction that's, you know, not the easiest, always are going to go, you know, through things. And then when you have friends to kind of talk to about that and move in that direction with, it really deepens your relationship with them. And I think it's amazing, man. I love that you bring that up. And I also really want you to have the opportunity too, while we're on the show, to really just kind of plug in, you know, any of your social media outlets, anything about whatever it is that we talked about, to that camera over here. Tell the people where they can find you, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram, preferably. I'm on Instagram more, Pluto Tectonics. What's up? And if you follow me, I'll follow you back. And keep an eye out for my content. Shout out to Optic Element for helping me deliver such high quality content. And always available. You guys can find me on Instagram, or if you want to find me, you can find me.
We'll also
love to meet you.
We're gonna include all of your information too down below in the description.
Cool.
That way people can find you. Jake is also hiring if you're looking for a job here in California. There's nobody else that I wouldn't recommend more to fall under, to learn, you know, sales, how to enjoy life, and really just the all around dynamic of being able to just live a fruitful life, not just on the finances, but within your personal and all that. You know, I wouldn't recommend anyone else to really to not fall under you and do it, because you're just amazing at not only like teaching people, but very good at making it fun.
Thank you.
Which is something that I really admire about you, because it's not something that I'm good at. You know what I mean? I'm not really great at making things fun, because I'm very like, let's just get it done. So it's very rare to see people who do that.